We're back with another episode of App Stories. Today's show is brought to you by ZocDoc and Vitally. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Viticci. Hi, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing really well. We had a really nice discussion in our pre-show for App Stories Plus subscribers and Club Premier members of Club Mac Stories. Today's topic, though, Federico, is task management. And I want to talk about the apps, but I also want to kind of talk about why task management is kind of I think a close cousin of email, where there are a lot of apps and they're not necessarily that satisfactory to me. I never feel like I've got the right one. And that's not to say that there aren't good apps. There are definitely good task management apps, but I always feel like I'm one or two features away from having exactly what I want.
Yeah, I feel like this is probably an impossible category of apps.
Yeah.
Just because they're, when you think about it, unless you follow an exact methodology, so unless you really subscribe to the GTD method, for example, or another popular method, which is the I believe it's called the PARA method, all this sort of fixed productivity systems, right? Which I'm not particularly a big fan of. I'm a big fan of flexibility, and I believe every person is different. But the thing is, unless you really implement one of these systems, it's impossible to have an app that can be as flexible as any person would require, because any of us is different. And when you think about it, managing the things we need to do, that's such a broad field of something that a computer program should do. It's impossible to design something that can accommodate everyone. And so I feel like you end up with these two ends of the spectrum, which is either you try to be a simplified sort of catch-all system that can work for as many people as possible. See, for example, Apple's Reminders app. You have to make compromises in terms of feature depth and design and functionalities, but you can you can provide this foundation for as many people on average as possible. Or you have the very specialized tools that have a very opinionated design, that have perhaps a more limited feature set, or maybe they go deeper on some functionalities instead of others. And so you have these two ends of the spectrum. And in the middle, you have all these different flavors and variations. Maybe there's the task manager that's best for grocery shopping. Then there's the other that's best for team management and team collaboration. And then there's, task management. It's not like you're saying, okay, I need to have a really good markdown text editor, or
Right.
I need to have a really good image editor, or an app to edit my podcasts. So that's a very specialized task. But managing my to-dos, that's such a generic and diverse set of requirements. I feel like it's impossible to have one app that does it all. It's technically impossible.
You know that great feeling when you finally find something that's exactly what you need, that you've been searching for on the internet forever? It's the exact piece of hardware that you were looking for, and the one that comes with all the great reviews. And it's even available in your country and with next day delivery. So why is it that you can get the most random niche thing from around the world in just a couple of days? But if you want to see a good doctor, it can take forever to get an appointment. Not to mention, how do you even know if they're any good? Thankfully, there's ZocDoc, a place to find and book great doctors who actually have amazing reviews, many with appointments available within 24 hours. ZocDoc is a free app that you can find amazing doctors with and book appointments online. We're talking about booking appointments with thousands of top-rated, patient-reviewed doctors and specialists. And you can filter specifically for the ones that take your insurance, are located nearby, and treat almost any condition you're searching for. These doctors all have verified reviews from actual real patients, not bots. The average wait time to see a doctor booked on ZocDoc is between 24 and 48 hours. That's it. And you can even get same-day appointments. Once you find a doctor that you want, you can book them immediately with just a few taps. so there's no waiting awkwardly on hold for a receptionist. I've used ZocDoc a few times now to get various doctors, an eye doctor, a general practitioner, and doctors for my kids as well. And the experience was really good. It's super easy to search for doctors, find the ones that take your insurance and are close by, all of which is really helpful. Whether you've moved somewhere new or you're just looking for a specialist for something in particular. Go to ZocDoc.com/app stories to download the ZocDoc app for free. Then find and book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/app stories. ZocDoc.com/app stories. Our thanks to ZocDoc for their support of the show. And that's really the core of the problem, because it is that everybody's work is a little different. Some people are managing something simple like a grocery list. Other people are managing, giant projects, building a skyscraper, and it's very hard for one app to scale from something as simple as a grocery list to something as complex as a construction project. Now, I wouldn't say that Reminders does that on the high end, like managing a giant construction project. However, I do think that within certain parameters, Reminders does a remarkably good job of scaling, in the sense that I think you can start using that app in a very simple way, making just checklists or simple to-do lists. But you can also use a lot of its other features like smart lists and column views and a bunch of other things to use it in a much more sophisticated, more complex way for bigger projects. I don't think all third-party apps do as good a job at that. I think some of them are more on the complex end. For me, what I'm always looking for with a task manager is flexibility more than anything else, I think.
Yeah, I feel like what personally what I'm looking for in a task manager, there are some aspects that I really value. And the first one is the ease of capture. I feel like one of my common issues with any task manager is there's always too much friction when I want to create a task, when I want to remember something. And I have this problem where perhaps my girlfriend tells me, "Hey, can you do this at some point today?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And I don't save that task right away.
And then you never do it.
And then I never do it. And then I forget about it.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
And it's different, right? Depending on, is this something that you need to do for your family, for the house, or is this a work-related project? And I feel like there are, even when you think about tasks, there are different types of tasks. There's the reminder, which is like, oh yeah, I need to take out the trash today at some point. And there's the more sort of, I'm trying to think of a word, where you need to sit down, for when I'm doing project management, right? And I'm like, okay, let me plan out the editorial calendar for MacStories, and I need to think about it. And then I also create tasks, but those are more reflective, I'm thinking about it, I'm scheduling things, I'm taking a look at the calendar, I'm moving things around. Those ultimately are still tasks, but they come from a different place of time sensitivity, as well as the outcome, right? Whether something is more short term, remember to buy some pizza tonight, versus in 2.5 weeks, you got to start writing this article. Those are very different types of tasks, which is why I think a lot of people have a split approach where they have a reminder app and a to-do app. Now, technically, those are maybe the same, but I think we see in our community, for example, a lot of folks use reminders for exactly the kind of first type of task that I mentioned, or maybe something like a due that's going to nag you until you complete something.
Right.
And then they also use something like Things or Todoist or OmniFocus to sort of manage more long-term or work-related tasks.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And what I use is Due for that kind of thing. I do have one that reminds me to take out the garbage. And one of the things when we moved is our new place, they only pick up the recycling every other week. So I've got 2 different Due reminders. one that specifically reminds me that it's Recyclables Week, because I always forget if it's Recyclables Week or not. So I do that. I use it for just kind of like mostly chores around the house more than anything else that have some kind of, frequency to them and they're the kind of things that might slip my mind otherwise. So I use that. One thing that I started doing as an experiment, I started using shortcuts to remind me of something, which is I have one reason to go into Slack periodically, because I don't use I don't use Slack. We don't use it for Mac Stories anymore. And I'm in a couple of other Slacks, but I don't spend time in there. But I do need to kind of check in once in a while. And so what I've created is a super simple shortcut that opens up Slack at a time of day when I know I'll be sitting at my desk in the morning. And it does it on a schedule using Linga Next. And so all of a sudden I'll be, I do it early. So it's usually I'm just, I don't know, reading my email or catching up on the headlines. And all of a sudden Slack will open and then minimize immediately. But I see it pop into the dock and I know to check it. So that's been kind of a nice way to do it without getting nagged by do. Because it's not like, it's the kind of task where I do need to do it and I will forget about it since I don't use Slack much. But I don't need to be nagged about it because it's not something that has to be necessarily be done on any particular day. So I just have it pop open in Slack periodically.
Yeah.
Open up on my Mac periodically using shortcuts.
Yeah. I feel like, I think there's a lot of different aspects and we talked about this before. And I think if you listen to App Stories, the kind of things we're looking for in a task manager, right? It needs to have natural language support. It needs to be able to handle URLs. Even better if it supports rich links when you paste in a URL. It needs to have an extension. It needs to have widgets. Even better if those widgets are interactive. It needs to support shortcuts, which is something I want to return to in a couple of minutes. All of these are sort of table stakes features of a task manager.
And also keyboard shortcuts when you're on the iPad or the Mac.
Right. And there are different permutations of sort of this combination of features, right? Even if you look at the iOS landscape and you take a look at Todoist or Good Task or Things, OmniFocus, like these folks, they each have a variation of this kind of mix of features and design choices.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Vitally. Customer success teams today are facing a problem. How do they connect customer data back to their work? Vitally changes that. It's a new kind of customer success platform, an all-in-one collaborative workspace that combines your customer data with all of the capabilities you expect from today's project management and work platforms. Because it's designed for today's customer success teams, that's why Vitally operates with unparalleled efficiency, improves net revenue retention, and delivers best-in-class customer experiences. It's the solution to helping your customer success team keep a better pulse on your customers, which maximizes productivity, visibility, and collaboration. You can boost your bottom line by driving more revenue per customer with Vitally too. And if you take a qualified demo of Vitally, get a free pair of AirPods Pro. So, if you're a customer success decision maker actively seeking CS solutions, working at a B2B software as a service company with 50 to 1,000 employees, and you're willing to explore changing customer success platforms if you already have one in place, schedule your call by visiting vitally.io/appstories and get that pair of free AirPods Pro. That's vitally.io/appstories for a free pair of AirPods when you schedule a qualifying meeting. Our thanks to Vitally for their support of the show.
But you posed an interesting question, I think, in our document, which is, what would the obsidian of task managers look like? This is a great way to frame this conversation because I know what you mean. Obsidian is the app that keeps pulling us back in. And even if we try to use something else, nothing comes even close to what Obsidian can do. And why is that? And what would a task manager version of that look like? And I think I know the answer, but I want to know how you're thinking about this.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this from just like I think you probably think I'm thinking of it, which is a core app that's at
Mm-hmm.
its heart relatively simple, but
Yep.
covers the basics, but that third party developers can extend with plugins. Because in a lot of ways, the issues that we have, I think, with task managers could be easily solved with plugins, just the same way,
Yes.
right? Just the same way that our text editing issues are solved by plugins in
Yes.
Obsidian, right? Because all Obsidian is a markdown text editor. There are lots of those. There are lots of good ones. But the thing about Obsidian is that we can mold it to exactly the way we work, whether it's using shortcuts, the shortcuts launcher plugin to fire off shortcuts right within Obsidian, or whether it's having our markdown links formatted for us when we hit Command K exactly the way that we want them to. You know, all those little things that make a big difference to you that may not be the way the developer would have thought to create a text editor makes Obsidian incredibly powerful because you can find a plugin to do basically anything. And I think that that would be, you know, I'm imagining something relatively straightforward like reminders, but because Apple hasn't developed it, a plugin that would let you use reminders with a Kanban view or something like that. You know, all the kinds of extensible things that I think that a third party developer might create for an task manager like reminders, or say it's things. You know, if things had a plugin system, I think that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I was hoping you would mention this because here's how I'm thinking about plugins.
Uh huh.
So I, I said that a text editor is pretty much like a solved problem, but when you really get down to it, if you are a markdown nerd and you do this for a living like we do, there's obviously so many different requirements. Maybe I'm a book writer, maybe I'm a blogger, maybe I'm a YouTuber. There's a whole right spectrum of functionalities you may want with markdown. And
Sure.
the Obsidian folks solved this in a very clever way, which is, well, if people want to do all kinds of things with markdown, and if it's impossible for us to try and solve all those problems, maybe all these other companies have thought about it the wrong way so far. Maybe the solution is not to try and design and develop all the functionalities, but to make a new type of foundation that supports functionalities made by other people. So instead, it's like, and I'm gonna surprise you, John, with an expression:
Okay.
give a man a fish and he eats for a day, teach a man to fish and he eats for a lifetime, or something like that.
Yeah. There you go. There you
Something
go.
like,
Yeah.
so in here with plugins, you're effectively teaching people how to fish. Metaphorically speaking, you're telling them, look, I'm not going to give you all the functionalities you're looking for. I'm going to
Right.
give you a framework for you to make your own functionalities. And that, I think, is the genius aspect of Obsidian, which is, yeah, the Obsidian team is going to make some core plugins. They're not going to make, it's not like you're going to be happy with all of them. But the thing is, there's a foundation for you to build upon. And with very little knowledge of JavaScript and CSS, you can make your own plugin, which is, I mean, is exactly what we've been doing at Mac
Right.
Stories with our own plugins, right? So imagine this idea, but for task managers. And I think I am surprised that this hasn't been explored so far. At least I am not familiar with a task manager that supports an open and extensible format. But I do believe it is just like, I hate to use the expression, oh, this is the Obsidian of task managers, but
Right.
the principle of it, like an extensible task managers, so that I don't have to hope for the developer to make all the functionalities I'm looking for. Instead, I can make my own. And that, I
Yeah.
think, is a powerful idea that, maybe at some point will happen. Some people use Obsidian as a task manager, but I've never been a huge fan of it because then it lacks all of those native features like ease of capture, proper integration with Siri, natural language support. Like, yes, you can use Obsidian itself as a task manager, but it's like when I was using Obsidian as a read later app or as a music tracker or as a YouTube video tracker. You can, but it's not going to be a great experience, I don't think.
Yeah, it's easy to go overboard when you have these extensible systems and do things that are possible, but not necessarily the best solution. So, yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think it should be doable. I'd kind of like to see somebody try it because, for example, Things is very much Markdown based in its own way. You can drag Markdown task lists into Things, and it just knows what they are and turns them into tasks. So I got to imagine that it's somewhat doable. Maybe I do use one thing I have been using lately. Speaking of Obsidian, is something called Things Link, which is an extension, a plugin that allows me to take a line of text, turn it into a to-do item in the Things inbox, and then automatically links it inside Obsidian using the Things URL scheme. That's not the same as managing tasks in Obsidian because all I'm doing is, maybe I'm taking some notes and planning out some things that I need to do. And what I'll do is I'll just turn some of those things into tasks, follow-up items for later, and I'll do it that way. But I think this is the kind of thing that I'd love to see somebody do because I think that there's potential there.
I feel like we could do an entire episode, and we probably have done an entire episode where we imagine our perfect task manager. And I feel
Right.
like, and I think we've actually done it. But the thing is, it's never gonna happen because our lives are going to change. And at some point, we're going to do an episode. And then maybe in 2 years, we realize, oh, there's a new feature that I want. And that's exactly why I believe it's more fascinating as a thought experiment to imagine the Obsidian version of a task manager. Not something that has all the features you need, but something that has a framework for it to potentially have the features you're going to need. And I'm gonna leave you with this, John, with this thought.
Okay.
That I've been thinking about for a while. Actually, a couple of thoughts. The first one, which I'm just going to mention it, just like Obsidian is based on the file system and Markdown, I am surprised that task management has never been sort of standardized into a format. And yes, sure, insert the popular XKCD strip here about standards.
Yeah, OPML, I think, is what people might tell you.
Sort of, yes, kind of. But OPML, I don't think it's got native support for dates or assignments or attachments and all that stuff.
Right.
But I think it would be interesting to have an open format for task managers. Also to increase portability between task managers. Some apps have experimented with like letting you export your task database as a JSON file or as a CSV. But I think it would be fascinating to have a proper format for task managers to make it more portable. But the other thought is, so this idea of plugins, right? Could Apple do something here? And I think we don't have to look far, in fact, for this to come true. Because all that we discussed, if you think about it, could easily be solved by shortcuts. Now, I don't want to be the guy who today I'm just on fire with these expressions. When all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yes, right. That's a very good one. Very good.
No, I don't want to be that guy where like every single thing's like shortcuts.
Yeah.
No, but think about macOS, right? And think about the Finder. And for the past few years, in the macOS Finder, you've been able to sort of attach these shortcuts that you make in the Shortcuts app as quick actions. You can just make your own shortcut, make whatever you want. In fact, we actually awarded a bunch of Automation April prizes to some of these shortcuts available as quick actions. You make a shortcut, you do whatever you want, whether it's modify a PDF or process some text, modify an image, whatever. And then you make it available in Finder, and it shows up in the quick actions menu. You right-click on a file, you see the quick action. You use column view, you select the file, you see the quick action in the column inspector. That is effectively a plugin, right? It is. It's a little plugin that you made yourself. You sort of attached to the Finder. You made it available as a quick action. That's a functionality that Apple didn't make. You made it yourself for your own workflow and use case, and it shows up everywhere. Now, imagine if this idea was expanded, not just to the Files app on iOS and iPadOS, which I have no idea why those quick actions are still not supported on iPhone and iPad. But imagine if you could make a shortcut and directly attach it. I use the term attach in the sense that this shortcut shows up with a button, with an icon somewhere. But imagine if I, maybe Reminders doesn't have a functionality that I want. But imagine if I could make my own quick action for the Reminders app. And that quick action is a shortcut. And that shortcut shows up with an icon, with a button, with a certain color maybe in the Reminders toolbar. Or when I right-click with my trackpad on a reminder, it shows up in the context menu. And imagine if this idea was also available to third-party developers. Like imagine if Things doesn't have a certain piece of functionality, and imagine if I could make my own shortcut, which I have, but right now I need to use the Shortcuts app or I need to use a widget or whatever. But imagine if that shortcut could appear as a quote-unquote native plugin of Things. So I think Apple actually has the framework for people to make their own enhancements for apps. But right now, it takes way too much friction and everything is a little bit undocumented. And developers cannot integrate with shortcuts directly on iOS and iPadOS.
Right.
But
there's a whole other system that they could implement too, which is the Safari model with extensions in Safari, which can actually be sold in the App Store because that's one thing that worries me more than anything else about Obsidian is that there are a ton of developers who are excited about Obsidian and making plugins for it, and very few of them that are making any money as far as I can tell, because most of them are relying on tip jars at this point because everything is very open source, and that's nice, but they're all hobby projects. And I've seen an awful lot of these plugins fall by the wayside because they become overwhelming for people and they're not making money off of it. And so the incentives are not aligned with continuing to work on them and implement new features. I'd love a way to have an Obsidian plugin store. And if Apple were to do something similar with Reminders or any of its other apps, I'd want it to be part of the App Store as well.
Yeah. Notes doesn't have the features you're looking for.
Right.
Make a shortcut and it shows up as a quick action in the Notes app. Yeah, so this is how this episode went. I feel like maybe people were expecting us to go through once again a list of all the features we're looking for, where in fact what we want ultimately is an extensible architecture for a task manager.
Right, which I'll tell you, Federico, is why I'm using Things right now, because even though there are aspects
there you go. Yes.
There are things about Things that I don't like, but it's got probably the best shortcut support of any task manager out there. And as a result,
hands down, I agree.
I mean, even if it's a little bit clunky, not because of Things, but because of the way Shortcuts works when it's implemented with third-party apps, it's still way better that way because I can do all kinds of templates and projects that I can fire off on a schedule and things like that.
Yeah. Shortcuts as quick actions in third-party apps. That's the pitch.
I like it. 2024, that's what we're going to get. I'm hoping for it now. Put it right on my wish list.
Okay.
that and Shortcuts just working on the Mac. All right, Federico. That's it. With that last jab at Shortcuts, we're going to end it for today. I'm going to thank our two sponsors, ZocDoc and Vitally. You can find me and Federico over at MacStories.net. We're both on Mastodon. Just go to Viticci.MacStories.net or JohnVorhees.MacStories.net to follow us there. And we're on Instagram, where Federico is at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHEES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.